Okay, my outstanding friends, we meet once again. Well, what are we going to be talking about today? Something that was one of my passions is physics and the properties of matter. Not understood at all. They don't know what the nucleus of atoms are made out of. All right, they're smashing them into little bits and pieces and looking all through them, trying to figure out what is this constructed of. Oh, there's quarks, there's hadrons, there's muons, there's bosons, there's all kinds of ons and ids, and it's crazy the names they put on all these particles. But all they're seeing is debris. They're digging through the debris. Well, let me tell you something. That debris is made out of only two particles, and I will show you those. And that is my dipole electron flood theory, which is nothing more than light. Light is two dipoles back to back. It's the smallest stable particle there is, and light itself is capable of extraordinary things, as I will show you. This guy is going to carve stones, and when you see the pattern that comes out of this carving, it is just stunning. Then we will see that light is literally water. All right, light is uncompressed water. Water is compressed light. I will show you these things. There is very little question about this. They understand now that the atomic standard model is just not right. It never was right. It doesn't solve anything. It doesn't take care of gravity, dark matter, weight. Everything is just nothing is explained. Everything is a mystery. That's why they've spent trillions, literally trillions of dollars trying to find the particles that I will show you in a second. And even though they are seen and easily understood now, they are not accepted because those trillions of dollars will be at risk. And we're the ones that are spending the money for those trillions of dollars. Okay, wait till you see this. This was sent to me by my friend Rob Clark, and they are going to carve stones with light. Watch this. All right, I'll explain it as he's doing it. Now, he's got to focus to the center. That's the central point. And all of this is literally eating away at that stone. You see that? Where do you see the pattern that emerges from this? It's just stunning. Look at that. Now, all he's using is light. Where is the stone going? What happened to the stone? Look at that. Isn't that something? Look at that. Stunning. Now, what else? That is light. Now, I'm saying light is nothing more than water. All right, so my statement is light and water are exactly the same thing. One of them is compressed, one of them is not compressed. Now, how can we cut steel? Look at these chunks of steel cutting with water. Look at this. This is just amazing. Look at that. Cuts right through the little chunks right off. Look at this. Look at that. They cut right through a lock. Water is almost one of the densest things there is. It is not compressible. What does that mean? You can't crush it. Water is virtually incompressible. There is a tiny, tiny, tiny bit, and I will explain that. And it's because it may have some extra electrons within it that can be squished out of there. Look at that. That's just water. Okay, you know that I like to tie in all kinds of things because, as I say, nothing stands alone. Geology, history, space, molecules, electrons, electricity, all of that stuff, the mythologies, you have to take everything into account, or you're just looking at one little piece. You say, oh, look at that, it's a rock. Well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Maybe it was alive at one time. Where did it come from? Maybe it even came from space. None of this stuff is understood now. And I get a lot of people that are looking at these ancient texts now, and all the things that were written about the gods and all the things like that, and how Mars and Venus were impacted together years and years ago, and all kinds of things were written in the ancient texts that always were dismissed as being ridiculous. But now they are not being looked at as ridiculous anymore. They're being investigated. So I get a lot of people that make these crazy claims about the Earth being flat and so forth, and water would just fly into space if we were spinning, and all kinds of things. That is not the case. It's gravity, and the Earth is a sphere, but there was, and then they could talk about the firmament and the dome. Well, yes, that's exactly true, but it's a sphere, and it has a dome around it, which is called the ionosphere, and that is where light is separated from water. But light is water. Light is uncondensed water. And that's where he separated. He put a dome and a firmament, which is the ionosphere, to keep the light separated from the water. So he kept the water above from the water below. The water above is just light particles, but when you condense it, it turns into water, and that's the water below. I'll show you this in physics, in actual things that can be observed and understood. I understand this stuff implicitly, and my long ago statement was, the transfer of energy is from light to atomic vapor, and that is a fact. And I did a lot of chemistry and a lot of physics and a lot of quantum. Can you see this here? This was I've seen it shown this a million times. I don't want to show it, I'm not bragging, but I had to do this to understand all of the different forces and the dipoles and all that. And I came out with dipole electron flood theory. Everything, molecular polarities and dipole moments. That's all there is. Everything is a dipole. Dipole moments, dipole, dipole, dipole. And I went through this stuff as deep as anybody's ever done it, so I have nothing to apologize for here. Now, my conclusion was that there was nothing but dipoles, and that is still my conclusion now. And that is what dipole electron flood theory is all about. And I put this paper out years and years and years ago, but a guy just got a hold of me, Paul Amatucci, said, can I put your papers in books? I said, yeah. So he's the one that's doing this. I didn't make these books, but he's got books for all my different research areas. He's got it for that, and for the mud fossils, and for ether flood theory, ether particle theory, and electron flood theory, and all my stuff. Giants and this one here, Giants, Myth, History, and Religion. A lot of it is pictures and stuff, and he jumps back and forth between my research, and I said, I don't care, just as long as you don't just throw in some crazy stuff. This is everything I'm showing and he's showing here is stuff that is based in fact, not just guesses anymore. And Velikovsky was the one that did almost all the research, but everything that I have found supports what he said. And everything that the mainstream universities now are finding also do, but they're trying to throw a spin on it, like make it 550 million years ago. No, it wasn't that long ago. All my specimens, which I have mud fossils like you wouldn't believe, and all of them were on this face of the earth here. They weren't buried deep. Some of them are just a foot or two under, that's about it. But most of it was on top of rock walls that they had put around all these fields and where I live here. And I just picked them up off the rock walls. I could see what they were. You can't miss them when you look. Hold on. There's feet, there's no toes. That's a foot from some kind of a creature, but the toes were built in. That's not a shoe, and that is not a sole. This is built in as one. It's like the foot of a creature the shoe was built in. I mean, that's not a shoe. It sure as hell looks like it, though, doesn't it? And I get so much stuff here, it's just out of control. And it's mud fossils. They recognize it now, and they have acknowledged that these things were exceptionally preserved, soft-bodied creatures from a great worldwide flood. Exactly what I've been saying for years and years and years. So anyway, now it's understood, we need to look at everything, because all of my research points to everything that we've been taught is suspect or completely wrong. So let's dig in a little deeper. All right, like I said, I like to throw in a whole batch of stuff all at one time. And what am I going to be talking about? I'm going to be talking about what they call the firmament, which is fine, call it anything you want. It's the ionosphere, the thermosphere. Then below that, you get a layer of absolute, very, very cold, then hot, then cold, then hot, and then you get down to the Earth. Now listen to what it says. This is the thermosphere, and this lies about 375 miles up. It's extremely thin gas, as they say. And the thermosphere becomes increasingly denser as you descend towards Earth, because the gravity is pulling the molecules denser and denser. Condensation. Now, as such, incoming high-energy ultraviolet X radiations from the sun begin to be absorbed by the molecules in this layer, cause a large temperature increase. Now listen to this. Because of this absorption, where the thermosphere meets the incoming radiation, because of the absorption at that specific layer, the temperature increases with the height. So the further out you are, the hotter it gets, because that's where it's mostly been impacted. It goes from as low as minus 184 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 184, at the bottom of that layer. The temperatures can reach as high as 3,600 degrees. That's a 3,800 degree difference, 3,800 degrees difference between the top of the layer and the bottom of the layer. How could that possibly be? And then it goes hot again, and then it gets cold again, and then it gets hot again, and then it gets cold again. There's several different layers. I think there's 3 layers of these ionosphere temperature fluctuations. I think it shows it over here. So right there, yeah, there it is right there. You see, this is the temperature. It goes way down, then it comes way back up, and then it goes way down, and then it goes off the charts at the top of the thermosphere. And these are what they call the thermal pause and the mesopause and the stratopause, or whatever it is. It's the pause where it goes down to the coldest. All right, it's between the 2 layers, or the 3 layers. All right, this makes it a little more easy to understand. These are the ionosphere layers. You see that glowy one, glowy one, glowy one? Coming from outer space, the light comes in. It bangs into this first layer, creating that glow and energy and heat. The other side of the heat is going to be cold. They're exactly the opposite. There's extremely hot, and then there'll be extremely cold. And that's the extremely cold zone. Then you come down to the extremely hot. Well, it gets less and less hot as you come down. The hotter it is up here is the most impact. And then this bounces down and comes back, bounces down and comes back, bounces down and comes back. That's why you end up with these zones in between the ions, basically ions. There's 3 different layers of ions. And what's an ion? Is all it is an extra electron, a free electron that is not attached to anything. It's scrubbed off of or bounced off of something. And they're floating around in this range right here, and then there's an extremely cold, and they go all the way down to the Earth. And that's what creates those different zones. All right, think about this now. During the day, what's happening? You're getting hit by light. It's going to be hit by light. So what is that going to be? You're going to get a very solid impact. And what that does is it splits the first impact zone into 2 layers. So it pushes and bounces real quick, and then it starts to separate as it normally separates. And here's what it says here. The ionosphere is located within the thermosphere, the temperature part. Extends from 37 to 190 miles above Earth's surface. It is divided into 3 regions or layers normally. The F layer, E layer, and D layer. Now during the daytime, the F layer, which is the top layer that gets hit first, splits into 2 layers, then recombines at night. And here's what it looks like when it splits. This is what they're talking about right here. During the daytime, it hits so hard up here that it bounces. But when it gets at nighttime, there's no more impact up here, so they just sort of melt back in together. And this F region turns into a single F zone. That's all that means. And it's only because we're getting hit so hard from the sun when you're facing the sun. So don't forget, here's how we started out. Light itself is just as powerful as it can be when you can focus it into an exact spot. Now, we did this with light, but we didn't carve anything with it. So there's some kind of computer-guided imagery in there that's creating this specific pattern, and it is elegant. It's just amazing. Look at that. Isn't that something? That is just stunning. Now, what we did was a little different. We sent light through a Venturi, but it has that kind of energy. You see that? It's basically the same thing. And that is just nothing more than pulsed red laser. And it is accelerating. Light accelerates, light slows down. You split the black from the white. There's black here and there's white. And it normally was together as a photon. Here we created fission and fusion. That's fission and fusion. If you break something apart, it's fission. When it comes back together, it's fusion. All right, I was going to get real deep, but I think it's just going to bounce off 99%. But this is what light is. This is a pulsed red laser. This light is just beginning to accelerate, and all of its fields are pushing against all the other particles that surround it as it comes through, exciting their fields. Push to shove excites fields. It creates a real hot side and a real cold side. All right, and this is the hot side, the cold side, the hot side, the cold. And these are just exactly what you're seeing in the coming down from outer space here. These separations, bang, boom, bang, boom, bang, boom, bang, boom. That's what you're seeing. Now, let's see what happens as that accelerates. All right, the acceleration, the particle that's there, and I'll show you the particle in a second, is pulled right out of the wave as fast as you can possibly pull it out. And it was a black and white particle, 2 black and whites together, and they separated here and they fused back together here. Fission, fusion. Now let's see that in a different shot. All right, this here is what they found at Fermilab and CERN. They found these 2 particles, but they see them in a whole vast variety of a zoo, they call it, of particles. But these are the smallest ones they've ever found. Well, they make up light. Light is basically the smallest particle that exists, except these 2 are basically each one of these, like that one right there together, and this one right here together, are like 2 bar magnets. When there's 2 of them together, it's stable. It's light. It's a photon. It bounces back at you. It's got like a bubble. It's got a little magnetic bubble around it. When you only have one, totally different story. One of them becomes electricity. It becomes heat. It becomes energy. The 2 of them together is a whole different story. Now you're into light, which is the smallest stable particle that exists. Then the next stable particle that exists is about 1823 or 1824 of these 2 particles together. And in a ball, it becomes stable. I can't tell you exactly why. There's got some frequency, and they're not stable. They're just falling all apart, and they don't want to be next together, and they hate each other, and all of a sudden, boop, they lock in. And that's 1823 or 1824. The odd number will be a charged particle. It will want one more, or it will want to give one up. Odd numbers are charged particles. And I can make this right here. That's still going to be hydrogen. It's going to be missing a ton of this stuff. Those are called isotopes, and that's why it's an ionosphere. Those are ions. They're ionosphere. Isotopes. It means you don't have exactly the right number. And up there in the ionosphere, it means you just got a whole bunch of these floating around by themselves. And it's all heat. All right, so then that's the particle that was in this wave. All right, that's the particle that's coming out of this wave right here. You see it? That's the particle. And originally it was black and white together. All right, it's exactly what they see at Fermilab. Well, what happened when it hit the Venturi? It exploded and created fission. The black went away from the white. That's a sterile muon, and this is electron showers. Exactly what it says. A muon neutrino creates a sterile muon. Electron neutrino creates electron showers. That's what they were hoping to do. They can't do it because they're working with protons. Protons are huge. A proton is like this. And when they smash these together, they just get all kind of debris going flying. We started down here. We're using this. One little puppy comes through there, and we can see exactly what it did because we're just looking at that exact particle. They're looking at a ton of garbage, really, just trash everywhere. And then they digging through it, and they find for years, literally years, many, many years. Here they are right here. It's exactly what they're looking to find is this muon and its electron showers. There it is. And we can do this for very, very little. And the energy that increases from here to here should give us free energy. And here's what I'm hoping somebody will look into is doing this. Shoot the laser through. The black can't get through. The black doesn't get through, only the white. The white is all we want. The white has no weight to it, and that's what fills our batteries and gives us energy. No weight. The white is what you want. The black, we got to get that away. And to do that in a generator and so forth, to make that, pull that white away, you have to do a lot of work. Here, we just shot it through a restriction. So it squirts out of here just the white. And that's all we ever wanted was that. And the white comes down, fills up the batteries. It goes through a photodiode. The diode lets it go through the gate, and it can't go back out. Once it fills up, we just use some of it to keep the laser going, and we should be able to harvest free energy, run it through all kinds of devices before it gets back to ground, basically. Ground just means where it recombines with the black particles. The white recombine. This is where it's getting separated, turned into electricity. Basically, that's it. All it is. And here's where it recombines, and you could call that ground. All right, but if we intervene and then we run it through our devices, we still go back to ground, we're still good. And we had free energy. So I don't see where this shouldn't be looked into. And again, like I said, I was going to get real deep into how ice is a whole different story than regular water, and how come they say it doesn't weigh any different. Well, it does. The reason they don't understand the weights of these things, how, like a battery, they say if you charge a battery it doesn't change the weight. Yes, it does. You charge a battery, it will change the weight, but very, very, very small, because all you're putting in is a white. The white has virtually no mass. It has almost no mass whatsoever. But it's got a lot of energy. So when you pump that into your battery, the battery really doesn't gain weight to speak of that you can see, but it does. And I know it does for a fact because I had to work with the weights and measures, and at that point we had to calibrate weights, and those calibrations had to be so perfect that the actual weights had to stay in the same room overnight to become the same temperature. If they weren't the same temperature, even though they were identical, the same, they wouldn't weigh. One would weigh different than the other. And the hot one would weigh more than the cold one. The hot one just had extra electrons. It had extra particles. That's what heat is just extra particles invaded. When those extra particles leave, then it becomes cold. Well, when they're both in the same room together, one's hot and one's cold, they'll mix together. They'll become the same temperature. That's just ambient temperature, it's called. Everybody gets the same temperature sooner or later. The electrons don't want to be pushed and shoved. They want to be, everybody wants to be equal to each other. But when you get a real hot guy comes in there, he's giving off all kinds of electrons. The cold guy's got to take it and they move it out to everybody else. When you get a real cold guy come in there, he says, hey boy, I'd like to have some of those electrons, and he pulls all those electrons out from the guys right next to him, and then all the other ones have to feed that guy, and everybody becomes stable again. That's what temperature is all about. And this is a complete separation of temperatures between the white and the black. This is absolutely hilarious. Listen to this. They're talking about superconductors. Well, what is a superconductor? It means you can just send electricity through and it doesn't have any resistance. Resistance means I'm going to try to push back against you, so I'm going to create heat. All right? You try to push me, I'm going to push back. It's push to shove, I call it. And anytime that happens, it's going to have heat and it's resistance. Now, here's what they're saying. Because superconductors have no resistance, superconductors do not lose any current in the form of heat. But listen to this. Therefore, totally energy efficient, except for the energy required to cool them down. That's hilarious. They do not lose any current in the form of heat, except you have to keep them cold. So what are they doing? You're pulling the heat back out. That's insanity. Zero resistance allows for many strange phenomena, including the ability to levitate a magnet in midair. Yes, all of that's true, but it's because it's so cold, there's no extra electrons in there. You've taken them all out. The extra electrons are heat. You've taken them all completely out. So yes, it's superconductive because as soon as you touch it with electricity, it says, yeah, I'll take some of that. And it all goes in, but it's instantaneously when you do that, it starts to heat up and cause resistance. And then you have to pull that resistance part, the heat, back out. This is just incredible. How could anybody say this? They don't lose any current in the form of heat except for the energy required to pull the heat back out of them. Oh man, I tell you, I've heard everything. Okay, like I said, I was going to get real deep into this, but trust me. You can trust me because I'm always right and I never lie. No, there's other reasons. I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. Now, like I say, I had to work with the weights and measures. This right here, you see this screw? What we had to do was go out and calibrate scales. And there was a plate with this screw held that plate on. And once you had the calibration, you had to get under and calibrate it to the weight of the weights that you had certified by the weights and measures. They had to be certified. And then you go out and you put them on the scales, and then you hit a couple of things and it says, okay, lock in the load cell. It's called a load cell. At that particular pressure is 0 or 5 pounds or whatever it was. And then we'd have to put those screws back on, and then we'd take a lead weight, like a lead seal, and we'd put it through here together. And then I'd take my seal here and crush it. Just like that. And then that's my insignia, Business Machines. And that's my number for the weights and measures. And that would have been sealed together, and nobody could get it off without cutting that seal. So that way there they couldn't screw around with the weights. And we had a lot of those. I mean, I did a lot of that stuff. So I know for a fact, there's no question whatsoever that when they're cold and when they're hot, they're not the same. Now listen to this. They're talking about what happens to the weight and the volume when water freezes. Well, we all know that when water freezes, it expands. That's the only thing that expands when it freezes, basically. Everything else contracts. Now, listen to this. It says, this is a study they did. And it said, in this season, students follow up on investigation they launched in the previous classes. They discovered that the volume of their samples increased as the water froze, as it began to freeze. But they may have mixed results when they report on the weight. They can't figure out the weight. And they say it's because the question of weight can be complicated by inaccurate scales, condensation that forms on the outside of the bottles, and a tendency to believe that if the volume of a sample increases, so must the weight. So even your mental attitude. So they really have no idea. That's what it boils down to. So, I mean, and I know exactly what happens is as it gets colder and colder, you keep taking more and more electrons out. They go out as heat to heat something else. And it gets colder and colder and colder. And as it gets colder, it actually gets lighter because it's giving off those electrons. When you push all those electrons back in, it gets heavier. That's why they have to be the same temperature when they weigh them on their very sophisticated weighing device. And I questioned them about it because I couldn't believe it. I said, well, you know, I didn't want to leave the weights. Here's what happened. This is how I know very clearly about this, because I had to go up there to get them certified. And I said to the guy, can you do it? I don't want to have to come back up here and pick them up. He said, I can't do it. You have to come back tomorrow. And I questioned him. I said, why can't you do it now? And he said, because they have to stay overnight and become the same temperature as the room. And I said, And I asked him why. He didn't know. He said, I don't know. He said, but we know they don't weigh the same. And nobody did know at that time. But he said, we know they don't weigh the same. We know that if something's cold, it's not going to weigh the same as when it's hot. And he just left it at that. So it's always bothered me. And that was like a zillion years ago. So anyway, I'm going to tell you right now, it's the electrons. When they leave, they have almost no weight. It's the same type of an electron that leaves. It's the same type that goes into the battery of your car. That's why they say they have no weight. The batteries in your car or wherever you use a battery, when it's expended, they say it doesn't weigh any different, or just the tiniest bit. And that's correct. It's just a tiny bit, because that white electricity that I showed you, that white juice has no weight to it. It has no weight. This part has no weight at all. The black part has all the weight. And they say the same thing at Fermilab and CERN. They say this is the muon. It's a fixed particle, never changes. This is a puffy abstract particle which has no weight and no mass. I agree with that. This has all the mass. That's why they say almost all the mass in the universe is dark matter. And it is, because the dark matter is attached to the stuff that we always thought was an electron, but it's not. It's a dipole. It has both. So this is the dark matter. That's dark matter right there. This solves everything. The dipole flood theory, dipole electron flood theory solves everything there is. There's not one single thing you can present to me that I can't explain with dipole electron flood theory. All right, and light ends up becoming water. It just gets condensed more and more and becomes water. That's it. Light becomes everything there is. We are made literally of light particles, which are these two particles, in all kinds of different combinations. That's what life is all about. All right, I told you, my research has led me to the fact that the ancient texts were very accurate in their statements and claims, and I have found Mudfossil supports virtually everything Velikovsky said, and everything that was written basically in the past, and things that were totally not understood because they were just too unbelievable to believe. This is the Nag Hammadi text found recently, 1945, and this was supposedly written by Judas Didymus Thomas, who is Jesus' scribe. And these are the secret sayings the living Jesus, when he was alive, spoke, and he was doubting Thomas, wrote those down. Now, number 50 is exceptional because it's just what we were talking about. See right here. Jesus said, if they say to you, where did you come from? Say to them, we came from the light. The place where the light came into being on its own accord and established itself and became manifest through their image, whatever that means. If they say to you, is it you? You say, we are its children, children of light. We are the elect of the living Father. If they ask you, what is the sign of your Father in you? Say to them, it is movement and repose. That's these are some unbelievable sayings. Listen to number, I think it's 80. Because I do the giants. The earth is made of giants, and the earth is a corpse. Jesus said, he who has recognized the world has found the body, but he who has found the body is superior to the world. Okay, that's 80. I think it's 56 maybe. 56. He talks about a body. Here it is, the other one, the corpse. Jesus said, whoever's come to understand the world has found only a corpse, and whoever has found only a corpse is superior to the world. Now, I don't know what to think about those statements, but the earth is a corpse, and it's just completely saturated with bodies of creatures that are dead from that giant flood. And these are the things that Jesus said that nobody else was saying. He's talking about we're from the light. We are light. Tell them you are light. And the earth is a corpse. These are things that nobody would ever accept. Except now we have the evidence to support this. It's no longer mysterious. The mystery is why we can't investigate this thing rationally as interested researchers and thinkers, instead of running and hiding from the things that now have physical evidence. You know, my mud fossils, that's no joke. That's all 100% certainty. Absolutely no question whatsoever. The things I have presented are, in fact, body parts, some of them from absolutely gigantic giants. All right, so what it is what it is. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at that. I love you all. Things have to change. We have to start looking at things with a critical eye rather than just accepting what we've been told in academia, because they cannot change their minds. Just like Max Planck said, science advances one funeral at a time.